Hi again, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's spotlight on physician assistant and nurse practitioner training and careers. I'm Amanda Dye. I'm the Director of Advising and Programs at Beyond Barnard. Really excited to welcome three alums who have distinct and really interesting careers within these professions to talk to you all about. We're excited to hear from you as students and get a little bit more info about your questions about these career paths, which we'll do after some initial moderated questions. So to get us started, I would like to invite each of our panelists to briefly describe your kind of academic and professional path from Barnard to the present. So Rachel, will you get us started?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I love seeing all of the beautiful, strong women who are on this call and interested in healthcare professions. It's fabulous. Okay, so my path to get to where I am today is unusual. And I think that if I had to give it a theme, the theme would be that I have never actually known what I was going to do. And so where I ended up is not where I thought I would be. And so if you could use that as any inspiration for those of you who are trying to figure out what to do or who have chosen a major and maybe aren't sure if you want to do that, it's okay. So where I am, I grew up in Chicago. I came to Barnard and I did the Barnard double degree program with JTS. And I majored in music and in Talmudic studies from JTS. So absolutely nothing to do with healthcare. I thought I wanted to go into the clergy. This was not my plan. And then as I got a little bit further along, about junior year, I realized, maybe I don't want to do that, but I really enjoy my majors and I want to finish them. So I completed them. And then I applied for jobs, which I thought I wanted to do in finance. So then I went into real estate finance and I was an investments analyst for 2 years and I was miserable. I learned a lot of great skills and professionally really grew as a person, but really didn't like my job. And so then I said, okay, all right, we've got these two very different paths that I've been on. I didn't want to pursue either of them. So where am I going to be? And a lot of personal reasons behind why I chose healthcare, but I also had a bunch of friends who were at the time in medical school, who were practicing physician assistants, practicing physicians. And I started speaking to them, and it really was a way of me kind of being in a profession that was very cerebral, that promoted a environment of constant learning, and that also had this very personal, interpersonal communications relationship with patients, and that was really important to me. So I then had this moment where I had to say, and by moment I mean like year, where I had to say, okay, well, what is it that I want to do in healthcare? At the time, my contacts were primarily physicians and physician assistants. I didn't really have any nurse practitioner colleagues or people that I knew. But I had a couple of people who I had spoken to, and my decision was a little bit more about, do I want to go to medical school or do I not want to go to medical school? And that was a challenging decision to make, and very personal. At the time, I made the choice because I was married already and I wanted to start a family. And I knew that while I was pretty convinced I wanted to be in healthcare, I also knew that I had been pretty convinced I wanted to do other things that didn't work out. And so I didn't want to commit myself to 11 years of school for something that I wasn't 100% sure about. So and I also wanted to have that work-life balance, and I wanted to be able to start a family sooner. So I applied to PA programs and I got into Cornell. I was very lucky, and I went to Cornell, which is in the city. And I did my 2.5-year PA program there. And I was just in love, smitten. It was amazing. It was the best program. I think we'll go through a little bit of like details of programs later. And then I graduated and I said, well, now I need to get a job. And so this is another decision point where I said, okay, well, I want to do OBGYN. I would love to deliver babies, really would like to do that. And instead I got a job in urology. So again, did not think that that was where I was going to be. And I started working for a urologist, and I have been in urology ever since. So that was, 2014. So it's been almost 7 years since I graduated, and I've been in urology ever since. I love urology. I never would have realized it had I not taken the plunge with this particular position. I worked at Mount Sinai for a couple of years and worked with a world-renowned urologist there who taught me a bunch of things. And then we moved over here to San Diego, where I am now, and I started working for UCSD and have been in outpatient urology ever since. And I absolutely love it. So career path has been kind of wonky, but I am where I am, and I absolutely love it. And I couldn't have asked for anything better.
Thank you. Ayala, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I also don't have a direct career path. Um, so I think that might be because I think at Barnard, we're in the liberal arts world. And I know for myself, I'd never heard of a nurse practitioner in college. What I did in college was I majored in sociology. I minored in psych, like I feel like all of my friends did. And I volunteered during my free time at Mount Sinai. So I took advantage of the city and I volunteered in a pediatric cardiac intensive care unit for kids getting heart transplants. And I really loved what I was doing. I was really moved by the work and I really loved the medicine, but I really didn't like the blood and I couldn't get over it. And I was just like, I will never be a doctor. I'll never be a doctor and I'll never be a nurse, because those are what I saw as the two options in medicine. And I applied after college for a job in public health. And I got it, and I was filling out the paperwork, and things happened for a reason. And someone saw my resume and asked if I'd be interested in a new position that was opening up in bone marrow transplant as a patient coordinator. Someone just focused on the patients, and they promised me there would be no blood. And I said, sure, I'd be interested. They offered me a little more money than public health. And I was like, that's amazing. So you get really excited about these things when you're right out of college and really poor. So I was like, this is going to be the greatest job ever. And it was. And it really opened my eyes to the world of medicine and all the different people that could play a part in it. I, though, was still afraid of blood. So I decided to go for my social work degree, and I got my master's in social work from NYU. And while I was doing that, I was working my first year in a program for visually impaired individuals with schizophrenia. And that is an amazing program if you're a social worker and interested in mental health issues. But I found myself focusing on their diabetes and their history of, heart disease. And as a kid, they had cancer. And I was really interested in the medicine piece of their mental health crisis. And I sort of realized that I needed to do something in medicine. And I had seen so many role models in my work in bone marrow transplant that I decided to go back for nursing. And in particular, I did the advanced program, the master's entry program that does both the RN and the NP in one program. And I went direct to becoming an NP. I've never looked back. I absolutely love my job. I've gotten over blood. I do bone marrow biopsies all the time with lots of blood. And I love my job. I love the patient journey that I'm able to be on with these patients for long, extended periods of time, especially in oncology. The world is constantly changing. You're constantly learning. I mean, I love my career, and I also have a work-life balance. I was telling Amanda beforehand, my attending that I work with, we work with one attending who's a close friend of mine at this point. He was saying that I have the best job in the world because I have all the fun. I'm never on call. I go home at the end of the day and I don't worry as much as he does. So it's a really good life and a really meaningful career. And I'm so excited to be talking to Barnard students and letting you guys know the opportunities out there for you.
Thank you. So I'll turn it over to our third panelist.
Hi, I'm Sophia Okoye, and can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's so fun to hear Rachel and Ayelet's stories because I think there's a lot of similarities. I was also not pre-med or anything at Barnard. I'm from Tucson. From Tucson, Arizona, and I came to Barnard and did history. I was a history major, and I took astronomy as my science. And like I saw all the women in the library, the pre-med women studying, and I was like, keep me as far away from that. Like, what are they doing? I'd see the kits and for the orgo and stuff. Anyway, but it's funny because then I thought I was gonna be a lawyer, and my first job was as a paralegal for the Department of Justice, for the DOJ in the city. And I never could get myself to take the LSAT or take a class or anything. It just wasn't happening. So I was like, maybe I don't want to be a lawyer. And I really needed to do some, I did that for a couple years, and I did a related, like a contracts job after, and then I needed to do some soul searching. I was like, what am I doing here? And I had always been interested in health and wellness, and like noticed problems in my family. Like I had, there's certain parts of I have aunts who I like love dearly, who struggled with some chronic diseases related to lifestyle, like preventable chronic diseases, so diabetes, hypertension, things like that. And I had always noticed, or I had noticed that there was like, certain groups of people seem to have these problems more than others, that there was these social factors contributing to this, but I'd never really heard people talk about it. My mom was interested in like alternative medicine, so I had been interested in that also, because I felt like traditional medicine didn't really address the problems that I thought were really important. I'd also had, like, after college, not so much when I was younger, I had times where we had to go to like charity care for medical care, and then after those jobs, when I had health insurance in those legal jobs, but there were like when I went back to do prereqs, for example, I didn't have health insurance and had to go to like community clinics, and realized that there was issues with access, and like the care wasn't always great. So I'd always, I paid attention to these like bigger structural issues with health and healthcare. And so medicine never really appealed to me, I think, for that reason. And so I actually wanted, when I did my soul searching and thought I could see myself like counseling people in healthcare, but it was going to be something like alternative medicine. So I actually looked into acupuncture and naturopathy. I went to Seattle and Portland and toured those schools and talked. But the thing was that, and I'd already like quit my job and started taking prereqs, and I had moved to North Carolina with an ex-boyfriend, because it's hard to take prereqs and not work in Manhattan or in Brooklyn. But I was doing informational interviews, and I actually found like a Barnard, you always have to find your Barnard alum that's in your career of interest and talk to them. So I found someone in North Carolina who was a naturopath, and I met with her, and it was tough because you basically have to be like an independent and have your own business for most people, because insurance reimbursement varies by state. And so she was kind of struggling with that, and her advice was like, look into being a nurse practitioner, because it's, you can practice in a lot more settings, and you don't have to like have your own business, and there's some holistic philosophies that like might be in line with what you're interested in. So that's how I found out about being a nurse practitioner. And so I looked into that and thought, okay, yeah, and I could practice in primary care, because that was the other thing with being a naturopath. I thought if I had my own business, I could maybe only see people who could pay me, and I was more interested in caring for people who had like less social resources and money and everything. So so I did all my prereqs, which, once I started taking them, I was like, oh, this is kind of easier than history. Like the answers are all in the book. Like, what was I afraid of this whole time? So that was fun and reassuring. And then I applied to schools. I went to Penn. I did a BSN, and I knew I wanted to be a nurse practitioner from the beginning. So there was an opportunity I did like a 18-month program, but there was an opportunity to do 1 year more and be a nurse practitioner. So I applied for that, and I did that, and I got my dream job, which I wanted to work in a federally qualified health center doing primary care. And so I went to Queens, and I did that for like 2.5 years, and I learned so much. It was amazing. But I was just really running up against these like bigger structural issues with, healthcare, but it's also just like society, and like seeing firsthand all these things that make people sick, and how it's so hard to then at the patient level, like try to reverse these things, right? And I had been interested in doing a PhD, because I had learned from my professors in nursing school that, they had PhDs, and they were involved in like more policy level initiatives and these like bigger change kind of things. And so I thought that that's what I would have to do. Didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but after a few years of working, I left the clinic and worked in like a more private insurance practice for a year at NYU. And then I got pregnant, and it was like, I was like, okay, I really want to apply for these PhD programs and do this. So I came to Hopkins, and I'm in Baltimore now, and I did the nursing PhD program here, and didn't, kind of had to learn that it was all about research, and I had no research experience. So I've learned a lot. I'm a postdoc now at Bloomberg at the School of Public Health, and I study older adult health and function, social and physical environmental context of health and function in older adults. So just my outcomes of interest are falls and disability, and kind of still charting the way, figuring out what's next. I'm trying to apply for assistant professor positions to continue research, but also teach. And yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So now that we have our introductions done, and I'm gonna actually just pop the panelist bios into the chat as well, so you all can access them. I'm gonna ask some questions that anyone is welcome to join in on. So first things first, since everyone has had a really different path, but everyone has come from a distinctly not pre-med kind of perspective as an undergraduate, tell us a little bit about your experience in your graduate programs. What was it like to move into an intensive clinical degree program after kind of not being a pre-med student in undergrad?
I'll start by saying I went to kind of a unique program. So I went to the master's entry program at Boston College, where they only accept about 30 people into this program. And most people in this program have masters in other areas, and typically liberal arts areas. So almost everyone in my class came from a non-medical background. So there was no one in my class who had experience as an EMT or other such areas. My best friend in nursing school had her PhD in classical guitar. I had another friend who had an MBA, another friend who had worked in public health, and had her master's in public health. I was one of 2 social workers in the program. So there were a lot of different backgrounds, and I think you just bring your critical thinking skills, and I think your love of what you're about to do. And I think Barnard women are all about being passionate about what they're doing and having thoughtful, meaningful impacts on people's lives. And I think that fit really well with my clinicals and getting my hands dirty and just diving in. I feel like we're ready to study. We know how to study. We know how to do the book part, and we know how to be passionate. And that's kind of what you need.
I would second that. I think a lot of it is mindset. In my undergrad, I mean, I wouldn't say I slacked off. I did a lot of stuff. I did a lot of extracurricular stuff, but certainly chose a couple of majors that didn't require me to spend full weekends in the library. And so I wasn't shocked at what an intense clinical program was going to be like, because I had spoken to a lot of people beforehand, and because I knew it's what I wanted to do, and because I had a job. My first job after college was an 80-hour a week, kick my ass kind of job. Sorry, excuse me. And so it was really tough. But when I decided that I wanted to go in healthcare, I mean, there was a reason why. There's reasons why they have you do prerequisites, and it's not only for foundation, but it's also to try to help get you accustomed to this lifestyle of learning. And it was a little bit of a shock. I'll say for every program is a little bit different, and it also has to do with the time. So like even in PA programs, you can choose a program that's 36 months. You can choose a program that's 26 months, like the one that I did. And so the intensity is going to vary. My program, my didactic year was, we did, let's see, what was it? It was like 13 months of in classroom learning, or 11 months of in classroom learning. And anyway, it was 50 hours a week. We were there from 7 until 5 o'clock every single day, learning in the classroom. And then we would go home and we would study, and we'd have 2 exams every week. And it was tough, but I went into it knowing that, and with this idea that, okay, but I'm doing this because on the other end, I'm going to come out of this in 2 years or just over 2 years, and I'm going to be able to work and do, you know, what I need to do. And so it was, you know, and so I think just doing your research and speaking to people who have done the programs before, if as long as you're prepared for it, you can handle anything.
Yeah, that's great advice, and interesting to hear about the PA, the intensity of that PA program. And I have had friends who've done it, and but I like I said, I found, so I did, it was an 18-month accelerated bachelor's of science in nursing. So everyone had a bachelor's and something else, and Penn has a traditional bachelor's of nursing. So they have like undergrad nursing students like your age that are there too. So you kind of join, but they don't start their clinical rotations and stuff until their junior year. So you kind of catch up to them, and then you do it with them, but you're a little off schedule because they take 2 years to do it and you take a year and a half. So you do your prereqs, and then you kind of catch up and join and start. Nursing education, I think, is a little more, it's kind of like you learn as you go. I mean, you do didactic and clinical often at the same time. And you kind of, it's a little different than medical education, because PA school is a little bit more like medical education, I think, right? It's like a condensed medical education. Yeah. Yeah, so I think, I mean, like I said, I wasn't too challenged by those kind of sciencey classes. I do think it was a little, you know, I do think we're prepared for everything, and you have the critical thinking, and you have the ability to like look at information and kind of pick out what's important. Some of the practical like test taking skills for nursing education is, it's all about passing the NCLEX at the end, which is the licensing exam, and it's a different, there's like this concreteness to it, which I think is different, especially if you've had like a history background or something. So some people kind of struggle with that, but there's a little bit of like just trust the process, and you'll be okay. But that part is a little bit different. And then for the master's part, for me, it was the other year, and it was similar though. It's like some lectures and then some hands-on clinical where you get to practice. And yeah, I think that's it.
So some of you have mentioned this already in some of your introductory stuff, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the aspects of your professional life that you value the most. You know, what keeps you in the career, or Sophia, what brought you into a more research-oriented career from your clinical background?
Yeah, so it was really this curiosity about trying to fix things, which is kind of a grand goal, and you know, we'll see how far that goes. But and I did really love clinical care, and I miss it. And I would like, you know, the idea also when I was an NP and like thinking about going to do a PhD program, I was like, I'll be able to balance, because it can be a lot to do 40 hours of clinical care a week. I think they're nodding their heads. They might have really nice jobs, but still, it's like just that many people like that you interact with, and that many people's problems that you know really address is, and especially in the setting that I was in, was just like a lot. But it's wonderful at the same time. And so anyway, I was thinking like I could do a balance, because you know, for example, physicians who are in academic medicine, they'll often do like a balance of research and teaching and clinical practice. And unfortunately, it's not really set up that way in nursing. I mean, people do figure out how to do that sometimes, but the structure isn't the same as it is in medicine. But anyway, so that was my idea. I didn't really want to leave. I wanted to balance my my clinical time with my efforts to make structural change and kind of learn what was going on and why we were in this situation. And I think I am just still really passionate about that. And I think that there's so much energy on healthcare right now in terms of policy, energy, and money and focus. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity to actually like make some change there. But I still am motivated by just helping everyday people and, my patients, and helping things be better for healthcare providers too, because it's a very taxing environment when you're working within a system that it has these challenges. And then I still get to interact with people and learn, like Rachel was talking about, that continual learning and feeling. And then, as Ayelet said, that like it's just very rewarding to know that you are impacting people's lives. And I think all of those things are what keep me going in this.
I think that's I think it's super important to highlight how these allied health professions also they're not purely, they can be purely clinical roles where you go and you see patients all day, but there are other things that you can do with them. And so the nice thing is you can go into one of these allied health professions and then the world's your oyster. You can see patients, you can do research. In my position, I spent basically 5.5, 6 years just seeing patients every day and all 100% clinical. And then in the last year, I'm the APP like supervisor for my department. And then I also lead a few of the hospital-based committees that are committed to advanced practice. And so it's moving into, and I'm in like a health leadership academy at UCSD. So it's moving into like a health leadership administration. There's educational opportunities, like Sophia's applying for the assistant professorship role. So there you could be on faculty, you can do so many things. And so I think the difference though, and this is not the question you asked, Amanda, but I'm using it because that's a point I wanted to make, is when you decide, and Ayelet and Sophia disagree with me, please, if you do, but if you decide you want to be a physician, there are these well-documented roles and pathways where you can go in all of these different directions. And when you decide to go in allied health, when you're an advanced practice provider, nurse practitioner, PA, certified nurse anesthetist, nurse midwife, those professions those are primarily clinical professions when you go to school. And then if you're interested in going these other routes, it is a little bit different. You have to kind of make a pathway for yourself. So you do want to be prepared for that it's not like someone's going to come to you and be like, okay, great. If you want to go do research, here's what you have to do in order to get there. Whereas if you were a physician, that pathway is very well marked out for you. So there is a little bit of making your way. But the great thing about that is that we are still trailblazers within these professions, and we are all figuring out what our role is. And there is so much opportunity. And it's about finding the people, the mentors who can help you get there and help you make that role for yourself. And there's really an unlimited amount of opportunity.
So I'll give the flip side argument that there are a million opportunities. You could, as a nurse practitioner, if you're a family nurse practitioner, you can do anything for peds to geriatric. I'm an adult nurse practitioner and I specialized in oncology, but I could tomorrow decide to do cardiology and the next day decide, actually, I really wish I was doing fertility work. You could switch your interests, your area of practice, etc. And there are so many opportunities for growth, but there's a lot of opportunity to just love where you are. And I think that's an important piece as well. So there are opportunities to go into administration, to get your PhD, to get your DNP, to become a thought leader in your hospital or practice or wherever you are. I have no interest in that. And perfectly honestly, I'm so happy with what I do. And I get everything I need out of my job and my career to make my career very fulfilling, that, just to get back to Amanda's question, that I have a great work-life balance. So I never wanted to be a doctor. It was never something it was never in my goals. I really like the holistic nature of nursing. I like looking at a patient through a biopsychosocial lens. And I love the relationships I'm able to form with patients and the impact I have on their lives. And then I love going home and playing with my kids. And I love that ability to sort of have a separation between church and state and find it meaningful enough to throw my kids in daycare in a pandemic to go do work. So they're both sides of that coin. I love what I do every day, and I also love going home at night. And I think it's okay. And I think this is important for Barnard women and women in general. It's okay to just like where you are. And it's really okay to also strive for more. So I think there are so many opportunities, and I definitely could have pursued a lot of different roads, especially if you're in a position for a really long time. There are a lot of different roads you can pursue. And I think it's okay to also be happy where you are. And I think there's so many ways to be happy in a role as an APP. There are so many ways, and that's the best thing for me about this.
Thank you, everyone. I think we've touched on this a little bit, but are there other things that you think someone who's considering a career in health professions, maybe not committed to a particular path within healthcare, but knows like, I want caring for others to be part of my life. Are there things that you think folks in that position should know or consider as they are thinking about which path they might want to go down?
There's a lot to know. Sure, there's a lot. I just wanted to follow up with what Ayelet said. I don't think I pronounced. How do you say your name? I'm sorry.
Ayelet.
Ayelet.
Don't worry, I respond to everything.
Yes, I love it. That is a really nice part, and it's really awesome that you can have a meaningful career. And I have good friends who work 3 days a week, 4 days a week, and that is really nice. As a part-time job, it can be, yeah, exactly. And that's one way to manage that 5 days a week thing that I mentioned. Another is to do some admin time. But yes, it's wonderful. And then it's great to become expert. That's like my downside is I'm like, one day I'll be an expert at something, maybe, but like, if you move around, it takes a while. But yes, there's so much to know about health professions. I think I advise talking to people from different or caring professions, right? There's social work, there's psychology, medicine. There's so many different ways, and there's a lot of overlap between them. So it may be good to talk to people, ask questions. Again, the roles are very diverse, like you can see from the three of us. So you might want to talk to a few people. I think one thing I also, I didn't really have a desire to be a medical doctor, but there was a point where I weighed it, right, where I was trying to think of if I wanted to go to apply to medical school or go this nurse practitioner route, because you can go to medical school and be a holistic practitioner, right, and you can do all the things that I wanted to do. So that's, I think it's just really important to know what you want to do and kind of explore different approaches to that. And I agree that one of the pluses is that you can change. And I was similar where I was like, I don't know if I want to commit to I've clearly like to change things. So like if I had, do you really feel like you're really committing to go into medical education? So that was a draw, but one drawback is you just get this power and prestige that comes with being an MD, that for maybe no good reason, but you get it. And so which allows you to like Rachel was saying, kind of like take these roles, like have roles handed to you perhaps without needing to do much else after that. So you kind of get a lot of opportunities in that medical education, and time goes by regardless, right? And I don't know that a few years here and there is that big of a deal. I mean, it clearly makes sense if you're like, I want to start a family now. Like there's just a lot of considerations at play here. But I do think that there are some power dynamics at play, which you probably are aware of, and some prestige, some social capital. Pay is different. So these are all things also to think about.
Yeah. I would have liked people to tell me, and that it I think it matters where you go to school. I don't think it matters as much when you are, if you're a physician, it really matters where you go to school, because that's going to help guide where you get into residency. It doesn't matter that much. I think, though, not all APP programs are created the same. I will speak primarily on the PA programs because that's what I know. I think if you're interested in something like that, you need to do your research. US News and World Report has a good and a bad rap. On the one hand, it's a way that everybody ranks schools. On the other hand, it's fraught with bias and all of these things that maybe aren't great measurements of a quality of a program, but at the end of the day, your employer is going to look and they want to know where you went to school and they want to know how it ranks. Other things that are important is that you do in-person learning. I'm a huge advocate for that. It's okay if a little bit of it is online, especially, if, God forbid, we're still having pandemic issues. But primarily, you need to have in-person learning. With your clinicals need to be in person. The more clinical experience and rotations you have, the better off you will be when it's time to get a job. So I think that's important, because a lot of people just think, okay, well, I'm gonna be an APP, I'm gonna be a PA, and that's great, and someone will hire me. Now the flip side of that is it's really hard to get into these programs. So I tell a lot of people who are applying, you apply, you'll go on and you'll see all of these things that they tell you that you have to have in order to apply, and all of these, all of the amount of community hours and healthcare hours that you have to have done. Apply anyway, whether you have them or not, because the worst that they can say is no. And if it's that application cycle, you might as well get in. I applied not having finished my prereqs, but having them pending and having had like half the hours I was supposed to have, and I got in. I was kind of lucky, but it doesn't happen for everybody, but there's no reason, it doesn't hurt you to apply, but it's difficult. So then when you get into a program, if you get into not the best program, but you get into a program and you're making that decision about whether to wait another application cycle to get into the better program or do the program that you got into, it's probably worth just going to the program that you got into to be done with it. I would say that, but just to be aware of if there are limitations to any particular program that you're going to, how to potentially supplement your education in order to overcome some of those limitations. So that's something I wish that people told me. And I think what Sophia said about the power dynamics is really important. And APPs have an incredible amount of expertise and autonomy, and we do incredible work. But there are people, physicians, patients, who will always look at us and say, but you're not doctors. That is becoming less and less and less of an issue with time because they're getting used to this. But it will come up. It will always come up. But guess what? For the physicians, female physicians have the same problem because they're females, and somebody says, well, oh, wait, you're not a male. And then, young physicians have the same problem. Oh, but, you're not old enough to be my doctor. So everybody experiences some type of discrimination. But I think coming into it knowing that there will be a situation that comes in when somebody says to you, well, you can't possibly know as much as somebody else because you don't have that degree or that pedigree. Okay, fine. It's getting less and less. And you know that you're brilliant enough and that you're strong enough and that you're good enough to be able to prove them wrong. And there is a space for that. So the power dynamics are there. And I think just knowing it going in and setting your mind that, okay, it's going to come up, fine. But I have the confidence to overcome those things is important.
I'll piggyback on a couple of things that people mentioned. But Rachel, in particular, I think what you said is so true. You are going to be sort of snuffed at times, and people are going to say, well, you're not the physician. I really want to see the physician. But own your role and you're going to earn their respect really, really quickly. I think that's true of your relationships with the doctors you work with and the other APPs you work with. My doc and I have very different knowledge bases, and he relies on me for a lot and I rely on him for a lot. And our knowledge bases together are an amazing resource for our patients. And I think that's how our patients see it, honestly. And they are so appreciative of what we both bring to the conversation. And I think you may have to earn it a little more than the doctor does by having that title, but you are perfectly capable of earning it, especially when you become specialized in your field. So for example, I, right out of school, was doing bone marrow transplant for the first 6 years, and now I've been doing leukemia for the next 6 years. And I am super, super, super specialized. I'm very senior in the field. I'll say it's very easy to get a job when you are specialized. There are people going to be knocking on your door if you become specialized in a particular field as a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant. And you gotta just own that. You know, you are senior and specialized for a reason, because you earned that, because you put in your time. And I think that hopefully we'll be able to counteract that initial reaction from some patients and maybe even providers at first. The only other thing I'll speak to is schools, just to tap into what Rachel was saying about schools, is I think the name of the school is really important, but I think the reputation is also really important on the ground. So I take students, I precept students all the time. Some of my students have terrible experiences because their school does not help them find placements, and they are trying to find placements and get really terrible placements where they're not really getting great experience. My school provided placements where they had relationships with people for years. So I went to Boston College and most of my placements were at Mass General. You have that on your resume, that's really impressive, because that has a reputation. And so I think if you have that ability to find a school that helps you with placements, I think that is really meaningful. It's hard to find your own placements, especially hard in a pandemic. And I think it's really competitive because the better schools do help you find placements. And I had amazing preceptors and mentors that I will forever be grateful to, for I am where I am because of them. I think that's everything.
I think that it's definitely, you know, to speak to the question of schools, I think with health professions in general, it's so important as an applicant to really do a deep dive into what are the resources that the school is going to offer you. You know, like, how is this school going to support you as a student toward the specific goals that you have for your career? Because that fit is essential. You know, when we're talking about programs that admit 30 people, they're looking for something specific to add to their class. And so I think really, you know, doing your best as an applicant to assess that fit on your side is one way to help kind of maximize your success in those application processes.
I'll just add one more thing.
Yep.
When I was in school, there were parts of the program I didn't like, and there were parts I felt that were a waste of my time, to be honest. And myself and my dear friend, we went to the dean, we met with her, and we formed a committee and actually helped to change the curriculum. So like your work never ends, but we did change the curriculum and make it more clinically applicable, and like take out some of the things that were that were kind of dated in the program. I'll also say that we helped the dean look at some applications, and my tip to you in your essay is be passionate about what you're doing. Don't say, I decided not to become a doctor and therefore I'm going to be a nurse practitioner. And don't use the word medicine, use the word nursing. You want to meet the goals of the school. You want to show the school that you're choosing them for them and what they bring to the table and what you can bring to them. So I think it has to be a mutually beneficial relationship, and they don't want to see themselves as your second choice or your lazy choice, which is how it sometimes presents. That's all.
Definitely a two-way street. So we have about 13 minutes left. I want to open it up to the students for questions. So if you want to ask a question with your microphone, you're welcome to add things to the chat, and I'm happy to ask as well. So.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is just for Rachel. So similar story, I feel like, to everybody. Like, I'm a senior econ and history major. I just decided that I wanted to pursue becoming a PA about a year ago. So I'm planning to do like a post-bac, but also working part-time because these programs require so many hours. And I was just wondering what you did for your patient care experience, and if you did that at the same time as doing your classes.
So yes, I did. I was committed to doing this as efficiently as I possibly could. So, and I was also very fortunate, and I recognize that I was married and I had a source of income. So that I didn't need to work, and so I didn't work, and that's, I think, something that's very different for me. I did volunteer hours. I went to Cornell. I asked them if I could volunteer. I worked on the bone marrow transplant unit, just kind of talking to patients and helping out with stuff, kind of like an aide. I worked in their acute rehab unit doing the same. I had a friend who's a neonatologist at Sinai, and I hung out in the NICU for 6 weeks and just like watched procedures and held babies and did all that stuff. And that all counted. It was not, but I didn't get paid for it because I didn't need to. So on the other side, I also said, okay, well, I want to do the cheapest post-bac that I can. And I will tell you that that's important. If like Columbia has a wonderful post-bac program to get into medical school, unless you are like dead set on doing that, don't do it. Don't tell Columbia I told you that, but it's not worth the money. I went to all the CUNYs. I paid like $200 a credit, and I did it all, and I did it in the summer. So I did like 2 summer sessions, a fall session and a winter session, and then started PA school. So I was in PA school 9 months after I decided that I was going to be in PA school. So, but just basically like killing it. And when I applied for school, I didn't have the number of hours I needed. I applied to all 9 of the programs that are in the New York, like physically travelable from New York to live in the city. And a lot of them required like 2,000 hours. One of them required 5,000 hours. Cornell only required, I think, like 50 or 500 or something small than the other ones. And I didn't even have that many, but I applied anyway. And they were like, okay, cool. Because they saw everything else that I had done, and they saw my passion and all of those things. So that's just a little part of the application. If you do need to work to make money, that is hard to try to figure out what you can do that doesn't require an additional degree. I think physical therapy assistant is one that a lot of people will do, or like occupational therapy assistant. Medical assistant does require like a little certification for a lot of places, but I think you could even get that online. So there's kind of quick ways to be able to do something like that. But your initial question of, did I do both at the same time? Yes, I did. And I was prepared that I wouldn't get in the first year that I tried. I didn't expect to, actually. Again, lucky. So I said, okay, well, then I get my prereqs done. That's out of the way. And then I can spend the next year focusing on all of that, all of those patient care hours that I'll need.
Great. Thank you so much.
Other questions?
I'll piggyback just on what Rachel said in terms of NP school. I was in my second year of social work school when I decided to become an NP. And so I did my master's program in social work while I was doing my post-bac. It's really fun, guys. But I did it at Borough of Manhattan Community College, a bunch of courses. I mean, really, the less you can pay, no one cares where you do them. They're literally check boxes. And Columbia had a different requirement than BC, that had a different requirement than PACE. And the ones that didn't match, I didn't do until I got into the school. And then I did those the summer before, so that it's pending. I wasn't going to take micro and organic. And so I was really picking and choosing what I needed. And so it's about being creative, especially if you have to do the post-bac classes.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. They don't mind pending. You can't have everything pending, but if you have like a semester's worth of stuff that's pending when you apply, they're going to admit you a semester before you actually start the school. So they don't mind, as long as you're like, yeah, I'm about to do it. And then you can, go ahead and do it. And you can enroll in, that's the great thing about the community colleges and about the CUNYs, is that you can enroll like the day before you want to start taking a class. So you don't need to know too far in advance.
And I really enjoyed taking classes at community colleges, because I did some at BMCC, I did some at Hunter, and then I did some in North Carolina at community colleges and another public school. And it was actually a really nice way to transition, I think, into these science classes, because it's like small classes and you're not in these big lectures. I don't know. I thought I really liked it. I enjoyed it a lot.
Gabby, you've got your hand up.
Hi, yeah, I'm a sophomore and I've been thinking about being a PA for some time. And I feel like there is a lot of importance in terms of building my prerequisites, like with my transcripts and having, the numbers and the grades look good. But I was just wondering if like I should still have like more of a focus on, like building patient care experience and volunteering, and like keeping my grades at like an okay average standard, because I've been stressed about that.
Yeah, I would say this is coming from just anecdotal experience of talking to people. I don't unfortunately have any experience like actually in admissions for PA schools, but from everything I know and from what I see on all of like the message boards, your grades matter a lot. So it is stressful, but that having that higher science GPA is something that they very much value. And it's one of those check the box things where they may not even look at your application if it's not high enough. I hope that doesn't sound too defeatist. But if your choice is like, oh, well, I want to spend more time, doing my patient care hours, if you feel like that is going to affect your ability to get those better grades in your prerequisite courses for PA school, I would say focus on your grades, get the hours that you can, and apply with that and see where that gets you.
Okay, thank you so much.
I think it's also instructive to note that none of our panelists today are people who like kind of went straight into professional education, right? So like, especially if you're feeling that pressure of like, I know I want to focus on my studies, and you're a student, and being an undergraduate student is a goal that you're accomplishing in and of itself, right? Like you're within your rights to take that time and space and then think about, when you want to apply based on the other experiences that you want to gather.
Definitely. I think you should take advantage of every minute that you're at Barnard and like, focus on that, do the best that you can, and then work on the other stuff a little later or on top of that.
So I see we have another question. Kautar?
Hi, yeah, that's me. So first of all, thank you all so much for taking the time to speak with us. This has all been super insightful and helpful, so thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. So my name's Qatar. I'm a political science major, and I kind of have like the same trajectory where I'm taking somewhat of a quote unquote non-traditional path into health. And I had a pretty specific question. I'm wondering if you would recommend taking prerequisite classes at different colleges or the same one, like after graduating. Does it really matter? And I'm curious about like navigating relationships with professors and getting recommendation letters if you're taking classes at different colleges or with different professors.
My recommendation letters were not from the science classes. I don't know if that's different for PA school. I mean, none of mine were. And it doesn't really matter where you take your classes, if it's from one school or not. I would say whatever works best with your schedule. So if like one class is offered online at night and allows you to do something else that you wanted to do. I know at Borough of Manhattan Community College, it's like condensed classes, like in 3 weeks, you have an entire chemistry class. So that was like how I made decisions. So this is gonna sound really bad, but you don't need to get everything you think you need to get out of these science classes. They are prereqs. What you need from school, you're going to get out of school. These are to get you into school. And so you should do well in them and you should absorb what you absorb. But even if you have the worst professor in the world and you don't understand much about what you're getting out of it, it's a means to an end. It's not about like the Barnard experience of having a great class experience in a profession, like a professor relationship. It's a different purpose. And it's a change of mindset, I think, from the way we did academics. But it's really just a means to an end. I don't know if anyone else had that experience.
Yeah, I agree. But I also did get at least 1 or 2 letters from some of my community college instructors, and they were great. And I liked the small class sizes because I could have a relationship with them and like they knew me. And of course you're going to excel in those classes and stand out. So, but yeah, it doesn't matter very much.
And this is going to sound totally terrible. Listen, I'm sure everybody on this call is like absolutely brilliant, because if you weren't, you wouldn't be here. But that's the thing about taking a class with, 200 other brilliant people and grading on a curve, right? So I agree with Ayala that there are some things that you'll take away from your chemistry 101 and that you'll take away from anatomy and physiology, and that'll be important and you'll learn it and you'll use it later. But it's more important that you get the grade you need so that you get into school, and that it's cheap and that it's convenient and you do it as fast as possible, and you're not worried about competing with this person who is trying to get into this particular medical school and is like cutting everybody's throat along the way. That is, and I think Amanda's probably going to kill us for like saying that you shouldn't do all your prereqs at Columbia and Barnard, but like it's not it's not necessary. So if it works for you because you're full-time tuition and it's great and you can just throw that in as another class, then totally do it. But if you're like, oh, hey, I'm trying to decide whether to pay $3,000 or whatever it is now, which is probably exponentially more than that. Oh my God, I have 3 kids and they're never going to college. But whether it's that or whether it's, the $200 that you're going to spend at Herbert H. Lehman in the Bronx, do that one.
I, in fact, always tell people, use schools where you have public tuition. There's, plenty of people need to finish prerequisites after undergraduate for lots of different reasons, and professional school is expensive. Like be smart about your resources is always important. So we're almost at time. Ellie, you've got a question. Do you want to ask it quickly?
Sure, but also if we need to end, that's totally okay.
We'll keep participants who can stay with us for a couple more minutes. If you need to pop out, we understand.
I was just going to ask so I know that I want to go into either nursing or public health, but I also know I definitely want to take at least 1 or 2 years off before I apply to any kind of school. And do you have any advice what to do with those 2 years if I know I want to go into healthcare, like how to get clinical experience, how to work abroad but make it applicable to healthcare?
I mean, it's kind of exciting if you have time to do that. And, you'll need to figure out, basically there's a lot of opportunities. If you're working, doing, maybe find a job that you're interested in if you need to work, and then you could do volunteer opportunities. All my volunteer or like healthcare exposure experience before I went to nursing school was I worked as a rape crisis counselor at St. Vincent's when it was around. And then I did a similar thing in North Carolina. And so that was nice because it was after hours, like it was nights and weekends that I was on call. So it fit in with my day job. But because so many things are applicable, you should probably do something where you're interacting directly with patients and in a healthcare environment. But there's hospitals, there's primary care, there's nursing homes, there are long-term care facilities. There's also research. There's lots of different research jobs that you could do if you're interested. I mean, don't do anything you're not like interested in, but if you're interested, then I would just seek out different things. And I think it's less like what you did. You want it to be something that you're attracted to and interested in, so that it all kind of feeds towards your trajectory, and so that you enjoy doing it and enjoy the learning from it. But I think, but down the road, all that matters is that you tell a nice story about it and that you did it, right? So I don't think you have to really worry about what you did in terms of that being attractive to admissions people. I think you just do what you can find and what you think is interesting.
I think you should do something that's fun, do something that's different, do something that's interesting to you. I mean, I randomly applied for public health jobs and ended up in bone marrow transplant. Things have their way of working themselves out. I also know that in our program, we have a huge clinical research program, and we have about 10 people every year who are right out of college and work for 2 years as data managers in our clinical research. And it's fun for them because there are a lot of kids there, there are a lot of people their age, and it's a good bonding. Everyone's kind of going through the same thing with a similar idea to go on to another healthcare profession, whether it's medical school, PA school, or NP school, or nursing school, or public health. But those kinds of programs offer some opportunities to get a bird's eye view into the hospital, see how it works, see what interests you, see what feels right. So being in a hospital setting, even if it's not with patients, which might be a little more difficult these days to get jobs in, might be a way in just to see the way things work.
Mhm. And I would say almost even to the other side of the spectrum for PA schools. Again, this is anecdotal and from like listening to a lot of people talk on the message boards, but I see a lot of people who are like, yeah, you know, I was a biology major and then I was an EMT and I have all these great scores and I have 17,000 hours of patient care and I'm not getting into PA school. And I don't see a lot of people who have had these alternative backgrounds who are not getting in. And so again, it's anecdotal, but I think it's really important because I don't know, I can't speak for the nursing programs, but I know for the PA programs, they really value alternative experience. And they want to see that you've done something that you are passionate about and that you are going to take that well-rounded life experience and apply it to your profession going forward. So do what you love. If you need to make money, go find the highest paying job that you can in order to be able to like do, you know, but that you love. But that is, I mean, I worked in finance for 2 years and, you know, was able to then go to school and not have to work. So do what works for you, what you love, but don't make all your decisions based on what are the admissions people going to love.
Thanks so much. Big round of applause to all of our panelists. This was incredible, super informative, and I know I'm speaking for the folks who are here today, but speaking also for the students who weren't able to be with us. Your insights are so appreciated, and we love to be able to count on the fantastic alum network to give great advice. So thank you all so much.
My pleasure.
Everybody have a great afternoon. Thanks.
If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Yes.
So nice
same.
to meet all of you. Good luck with everything. Stay safe.
Yes.
Good luck, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you
Bye,
so much.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Rachel. Bye, Amanda.
Nice to meet
Bye.
you guys.
So nice
So
to
great
meet
to
you.
meet you. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Bye.